Morning, everybody, and welcome back to Behind the Curtain of Leadership. Hey, in the last video, I talked about the reality that as a leader, whether you think you are or not, you are completely transparent to your team and your team members. There's no way to hide that. There's no way to avoid that. That people see through the leader when they're trying to avoid something, fake something, anything like that. So today I want to talk about something that's been debated forever, really, and continues to be debated. And it's talking about leadership and management, or more specifically, leaders and managers, and what's the difference, and how do you compare the two, and reality, which one is quote unquote better, according to social media and society. And this was actually a chapter I left out of my book intentionally, but I think it's worth unpacking here because it's one of those topics that still causes confusion and frustration in the real world, in the business world, in social media, on every business news outlet. There's always the discussion about leaders, managers. Which one's the difference? Which one's better? So you've probably seen the endless stream of articles, charts, and social media posts trying to define these differences. It's everywhere, and it just seems like nobody wants to let this go. You would think by now we'd all have a common understanding and mutual respect for both roles, and we just move on. But for some reason, we don't. Just can't get past this constant comparison about who's better, leaders or managers. And I think a big part of it comes down to how society trains us to think, to compete, to rank, to judge, to be the winner, right? We all grow up believing that being the winner is the only way to really matter. And that carries right on into adult life, personal, and the workplace. I mean, when was the last time you saw anyone rewarded for finishing outside the top three in anything? You can think about, the NFL playoffs. You make it to the divisional round of the top eight teams and lose, the next day you're forgotten, right? Everybody's moved on. You're old news. I mean, you were one of the best eight teams out of 32, but nobody remembers that. And the mindset bleeds into everything. It bleeds into everything, including business. So society decided somewhere along the line that in business, leaders are somehow more important than managers. And we see this again, we see and hear it debated all the time. So when that happens, then what happens? Well, what a lot of times you see is people who may be great managers or amazing individual contributors start believing that they need to, quote, move up into a leadership role to be seen as successful. They leave a role they're naturally gifted at, probably perform very well, and walk into one that doesn't fit them. And what happens? Well, usually what it does is it causes frustration for themselves and everyone around them. They're less effective, the team is less successful, and the company tends to struggle. And it also causes a bigger problem because now you have a previously effective manager or individual contributor, one that was effective, who's now an ineffective leader. And so where do you think that's going to lead? Yeah, eventually it can and usually will lead to the company replacing this formerly great manager who's now an ineffective leader. And now you have turnover in that leadership position again. So let's take a step back for just a minute. So when you think about leadership versus management, which one gets the spotlight? Leaders, right? I mean, when was the last time you saw a series on Netflix celebrating the great managers of the world? You don't. You don't see that. We celebrate leadership, we talk about it, we glorify it, but management rarely gets the same respect. And this is where judgment starts to creep in. We start labeling and ranking people, leaders, managers, supervisors, workers, and suddenly we've created this whole hierarchy of value instead of understanding that each role really matters and how they matter. And that's why this debate, I think, never ends. Because as long as we're judging one role will always be seen as better. That's just the nature of judging. So here's how I look at it in practical terms when we think about leaders and managers. So leaders tend to set the tone and the culture. They lead people. They don't manage processes. They know the goal, but they stay open to change. They create a vision and inspire others to see themselves in this vision. They develop people into leaders. They help the team push past mental and emotional obstacles. They think strategically. They lead by example, thoughts, words, actions. And most importantly, they're accountable to everyone on the team. Now you contrast that with managers, and what I've seen is that managers tend to be process-driven and organized. They communicate direction clearly. They follow the plan and measure results. They keep things running smoothly. As a guy I used to work for one time said, they keep the trains running on time and the team moving. They tend to think tactically, and they usually report up to someone, which is usually the leader. Both roles are essential. Both require skill, discipline, and care. They're just focused on different things. And here's how I think of this in a broader sense, is leadership really comes from the heart. It's emotional. It can be conceptual, sometimes intangible. Management, on the other hand, tends to come from the brain. It's practical, structured, and tangible. I mean, if you're one of these people that maybe you're a great manager, you want to be in leadership. If you don't genuinely like people, their quirks, their unpredictability, their drama, you're gonna struggle as a leader. I mean, you might be a great manager, but you're probably not going to do too well in a leadership role, and that's fine. That's absolutely fine. Every team needs both. And in reality, every leader needs to be able to manage, and every manager needs to be able to lead to some degree. It's just that one side typically, comes more naturally. About 20 years ago, I met a retired Marine Lieutenant Colonel at a networking event, and we started talking about leadership. And he said something that struck with me. Now, I've since seen this many times, but back 20 some years ago, this is the first time I heard it. And he said, Brett, he said, you lead people and you manage processes. Don't ever, ever confuse the two. And I have carried that with me ever since, and I've shared that with hundreds of people. And I've kind of added my own version over time of this, and this is what I think. I think one of the most important things that that leaders do is they create an environment that inspires others to grow and improve. And managers create the systems and processes that help make that growth possible. Both matter, both are valuable, neither one can function without the other. So instead of asking which one's more important, we should be saying, how can we get the right people in the right roles so the whole team wins? We have to stop comparing and judging and start appreciating the contributions that each role brings. It's not going to change overnight, but it can start right now, and it can start with each one of us. So I'm going to leave you with one of my favorite quotes from Sun Tzu. He said, strategy without tactics is the slowest path to victory. Tactics without strategy is the noise before defeat. It's pretty cool, isn't it? So if you restate that with using the word leader and manager, you could say leaders without managers is the slowest path to victory. Managers without leaders is the noise before defeat. Both leadership and management matter. Neither can succeed without the other. Thanks for watching today, and as always, I hope this gave you something to think about and reflect on in your role, how you show up for your team. Remember, sometimes you're watching these videos and you only pick up one thing out of them, one simple thing. You go, wow, that's interesting. I should think about that. And hopefully this is one of those for you today. But anyway, next time we're going to talk about the differences between what I call drivership and leadership. And so hope you can jump in on that next week. But thanks again, and take care.